You know, we're all taught this really simple story about how capitalism started, right? Barter was clunky, so we invented money. Easy. But what if that whole story is just a complete myth? Today, we're going to dig into the work of economist Hong Ki Bin, because he uncovers a much more radical and, frankly, a much more relevant origin story for the economic system we all live in.
And look, this isn't just some dusty academic question. The economic system we live in, it feels permanent, right? Unshakable. But what if its core principles are on a collision course with the reality of our world? Suddenly, understanding how this machine really works becomes more critical than ever.
So here's exactly why this matters so much right now. Hong Ki Bin points to a really chilling climate prediction. And we're not talking about gradual warming here. No, this is about a potential sudden catastrophe, one that could plunge parts of Europe and North America into a deep freeze. But the real threat here, even beyond the insane temperature drop, is the complete annihilation of predictability. Think about it. Our entire capitalist system is built on being able to forecast the future. Calculating risk, projecting profits, securing resources. So what happens when the very climate we depend on becomes fundamentally, terrifyingly unpredictable?
Okay, so to really get a grip on how our system might handle a shock like that, we have to go back, way back, to its origins. And that means we first have to tear down the biggest myth of all, the story of how money was supposedly invented.
Yeah, we've all heard it, right? It's in every Econ 101 textbook. Barter was just too inefficient, so poof, we invented money. But it turns out, according to the actual historical record, that narrative is, and I quote, a complete lie. After a century of looking, anthropologists haven't found a single solitary society that ever developed this way. Not one.
So why is this story such a myth? Well, there are a couple of huge reasons. First, like we just said, there's zero evidence. But second, it's just mathematically impossible. Just try to imagine a market with only 100 different things for sale. To make barter work, you'd have to memorize almost 5,000 different exchange rates. How many goats for a pot, how many pots for a blanket, how many blankets for a goat. It's a total nightmare. It's a system that's just way too complex to ever work in the real world.
The truth is, early trade between strangers was, well, it was terrifying. It was much more like a tense standoff than some friendly neighborhood market. And this is where you get these really fascinating practices, like silent trade. To avoid getting into a fight, one group would just leave their stuff at a specific spot and then leave. The other group would show up, put down what they were offering in exchange, and then they'd leave too. And this would go back and forth until they both agreed, all without ever meeting face to face. The goal wasn't to make a profit, it was to not get killed. It was about survival.
All right, so if capitalism didn't just naturally grow out of barter, then where in the world did it come from? The answer, it turns out, isn't in a marketplace at all. It's in a radical, totally new way of thinking.
This is the big one. This is the revolutionary idea. Before capitalism, economies were basically all about managing the household. Getting what you needed to live. That was it. The idea of growing your wealth infinitely just for the sake of growing it, that concept simply did not exist. This idea, this infinite expansion of asset value, was a complete, radical break from pretty much all of human history up to that point.
But, a dream of infinite growth is kind of useless if you can't measure it. And that's where a world-changing technology comes in. Double-entry bookkeeping. Seriously. For the very first time, you could actually calculate your total net worth at any given moment. Suddenly, wealth wasn't just a pile of gold or a herd of sheep anymore. It was an abstract number on a page. And a number can grow forever. This was basically the operating system for this brand new capitalist mind.
And this is just a stunning insight. The historian Werner Sombart makes this incredible argument that capitalism wasn't born in some bustling market or on a trade route. No, he says it was born with the publication of a book on accounting. Think about that. That was the moment the intellectual software for our entire modern world was created.
Okay, so we've got the revolutionary idea, and we've got the tech to make it work. But how did it take over the entire planet? Well, it needed a really powerful catalyst to kick things into high gear. And that catalyst was constant, brutal warfare.
So here's how this unholy alliance came together. Picture 16th century Europe. Monarchs are in a total bind. They're constantly at war and they need cash, not crops, not land, to pay for professional armies and all the new tech, like cannons. The old-school land-rich nobles, they didn't have that kind of liquid cash. But you know who did? The rising merchant class, the bourgeoisie. They had tons of it. And so a powerful alliance was born. The merchants fronted the money, and the kings used that money to crush the nobles, centralize their own power, and in the process, create the modern state as we know it.
And if you want a fascinating little piece of evidence for this deep connection, just look at the word soldier. It actually comes from the name of a Roman gold coin, the soldatus. A soldier literally means the one who gets paid. From the very beginning, organized warfare wasn't just about loyalty or patriotism, it was a business fueled by cold, hard cash.
Okay, so we have the idea. We have the technology. We have the political alliance. But what about the people themselves? What was the human engine? What drove actual individuals to chase after wealth with such a relentless, almost obsessive focus? The answer is, well, it's pretty surprising. It wasn't just greed. It was religious anxiety. And it's really crucial to understand the difference here between the new capitalist and the old-school merchant. Sure, the traditional merchant could be greedy, but they were often irrational. They'd spend a ton of money on fancy stuff or gamble their fortune away. The new capitalist, on the other hand, was completely different. They were methodical, systematic, and hyper-rational. So the big question is, what changed? What caused that shift?
Well, the answer lies in this really unsettling religious idea that was popular with Protestant reformers. It's called predestination, and the core belief was this: God had already decided if you were going to heaven or hell before you were even born, and there was absolutely nothing you could do to change it. And the worst part, you could never, ever be sure which group you were in.
I mean, can you imagine the psychological pressure? It was unbearable. Believers were desperately looking for any sign, any little clue that they were one of the chosen ones, one of the elect. And the solution they latched onto was success in this world. Working hard, being methodical, and accumulating wealth, that wasn't seen as being greedy anymore. Instead, it was seen as proof that God was smiling on you. And this is the absolute key. These early capitalists chased profit with a kind of religious fire, not to buy fancy things, but to prove to themselves and everyone else that they were saved. Making money became a sacred duty.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen that capitalism isn't some natural, inevitable thing. It's a very specific system, born from a bizarre idea of infinite growth, supercharged by war, and driven by deep-seated religious anxiety. And now, this system, which is built on a dream of the infinite, is slamming headfirst into the hard reality of a very finite planet. So knowing its real origins, we have to ask the big question: can a system like this actually adapt? Or was its final collapse programmed into its DNA from the very beginning?